Good afternoon, and welcome to the Sustainable Mail Group's third symposium this year, when recycling becomes your responsibility, extended producer responsibility, and direct mail. My name is Ward Griffin, and I'm the chairperson of the Sustainable Mail Group. The Sustainable Mail Group is a nonprofit, member-driven organization that seeks to bring together participants in the direct mail industry, from marketer to delivery and everywhere in between, to help make the industry more environmentally sustainable. Some minor housekeeping details for this event today. We're scheduled from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. You can ask questions using the chat and or the question and answer function, but the questions won't be answered until the last 10 minutes of the event. The event is being recorded and will be posted to the Sustainable Mail Group's YouTube channel, where you can also find our first two events entitled Choosing Paper, Why It's Important and How Your Organization Can Drive Change, and Measuring Your Carbon Footprint, Why It Makes Good Business Sense. A link to those videos is visible in the chat right now. If you don't want to miss any of our content, I recommend that you subscribe to our channel and also click on that bell icon when you subscribe so you don't miss any of the content. If you like what you see, please consider joining the Sustainable Mail Group at the link provided in the chat and become part of our community. I know it will provide benefits to your company, and I know if you're a member, you will provide benefits to the industry as a whole. So please consider joining the Sustainable Mail Group. So let me hand over to our moderator for today's event, Stéphane Dagenet. Stéphane is a 35-year marketing and sales veteran of the paper industry. He currently leads the Domtar Canadian sales team. Stéphane also happens to be my vice chair of the Sustainable Mail Group. So over to you, Stéphane, and enjoy the session today, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ward. Well, to begin here, what we want to do is provide some insight around extended producer responsibility, and specifically its impact on companies that are operating in the marketing mail industry. It's a pretty broad topic, so we have to narrow it down a little bit. And the idea is not to debate the efficacy of these programs or to provide feedback on how they can be made better. That would be also another topic. But our goal is to educate our audience. In essence, if what we want you to know is to find out today if you're impacted or not. And if you are impacted, investing some time into it would be a good investment of a resource here. From our own experience and from conversation with some of our stakeholders, we think there's a lack of knowledge about EPR, what it is, how it has evolved in Canada, and how it's administered. And so we brought in some good panelists to guide this through this topic with us. So I will ask the panelists as we introduce them to one by one to give it a bit of a short bio on 1 or 2 minutes on who they are and how they're linked to this topic, and then after that we'll start having the conversation. We have a few questions for them. So Pierre, you're going to be the first one to give us a little bit of your bio here and about information that you want to share with us, and I'll leave the microphone to you right now.
Thank you, Stéphane, and pleased to be here. So yes, my name is Pierre. I'm involved in the recycling industry for close to 10 years now. I work currently on market development for recyclable material, and I've been involved with the EPR PRO for packaging in Quebec. So the Producer Responsibility Organization in Quebec is Éco-Entreprise Québec. I've been working with them for some years on market development for recyclable material. And now I am doing end market development and recyclability assessment for producers on my own with my consulting firm, Liken. Nice to meet you, everyone.
Merci, Pierre. And you're also, I was mentioning earlier, that you're a graduate or alumni of the same university I am, Sherbrooke. Way to go. So we'll go to Gord, and also if you can give us a short intro, please.
Yes, thank you, Stéphane, and good afternoon, everyone. Name is Gordon Day. I'm with a company called Rise Solutions, which is one of the pros, the blue box pros in the Ontario marketplace. Which we'll be talking about a bit today, I suspect. My history, though, I've got about 30 years experience in this wonderful world of producer responsibility in Canada. I was involved in the early days of Stewardship Ontario, and that's where I met your cohort, Andrew Gustin, in the early days of establishing reporting requirements and definitions in the Stewardship Ontario program. We then went on to help EEQ in their establishment, and then some other provinces. I was involved in similar programs for electronics and batteries, and have a bit of a history of the evolution of these programs in Canada. And what we have seen is this evolution a little bit in the regulations in Ontario from this idea of a collective model, which is fairly consistent in Canada, to a individual producer responsibility model, which we'll discuss a bit later. But it's great to be here, and I thank you for the opportunity to address any questions that your members have.
Thank you, Gord. And Peter, up to you.
Perfect. Yes, my name's Peter Hargreave. I've got a small consultancy firm like Pierre. I'm in Hamilton, Ontario. I've been working in this field for about 16 years, working for government, working in the trade association for the waste and recycling sector, and then for the last 5 years have been consulting on my own to producers, to local and provincial, federal government, and recyclers on how to establish sustainable policies and programs.
Well, thank you. And Peter, I'll start with lobbing you an easy question. What is extended producer responsibility? I guess there
is no easy questions on producer responsibility. Producer responsibility is at a very high level. It's an economic or environmental policy that assigns financial and or operational responsibility for the end of life management of products or packaging. The producer, when we talk about producer, is usually defined as the brand holder or some other person with a commercial connection to supplying the products to the consumer. Like any other policy that we've got out there, lots of nuances, lots of differences in how those policies are set up and what it might mean to each of you as you look at different policies across the country and then into the US.
Thank you. So obviously it's been around for a number of years in Canada in one shape or another, but Gord, obviously there's something that's changed. Why we're all here, something has evolved in the past year, and I'm hoping you can give us a little bit of info on why all of a sudden this is making it to a lot of more people's radar screen.
Yeah, the change is that's causing everybody some notice is what's happening in Ontario, where Ontario, going back a number of years ago, had signaled a move in their regulatory structure to move away from this idea of a collective model for extended producer responsibility to one that has a more direct connection between the producer, as Peter identified, the company who has the obligation, and how they're going to achieve those requirements. And it's a model that we've seen in other jurisdictions. It's not new, but it is new to North America and new to Canada. So that's why it's causing some consternation and some challenges. But it's this concept of moving away from what we used to call, or we can characterize as a collective model. Let's say in EEQ or another province where there's a law that says producers have an obligation, and then they can meet that obligation by joining this required organization. You don't have any choice in Quebec or in some of the other provinces. You have to report through this one organization. And then that organization takes care of the producer's obligations in a collective way. It basically rolls up everybody's obligation and does it en masse. And in doing so, there's no direct connection between the producer and the regulatory agent or the regulator. And that's the big change that's happened in Ontario, is Ontario has said, no, we're going to have legal requirements that were no different really than before. Companies having requirements to do X, Y, to collect, manage, and report on the performance that they've achieved. But they're actually going to have to do it on an individual basis. And that means there's now more direct responsibility on the producer to understand that. And then coming with that requirement is, rather than you having the requirement to join one organization, we're going to give you, the producer, choice on who you work with to meet your legal obligations. And that choice in Ontario is called a PRO, a Producer Responsibility Organization. And that PRO there's more than one PRO across the different materials, and you, the producer, get choice on who you get to work with. And so it's a slightly different variation. We like to characterize your PRO as now a vendor, a customer of yours. You get to choose who you get to work with, like you do for waste management services or printing services or a whole bunch of things. This is just another choice that the producer has. Rather than in the past, under the collective model, you tended to view the EEQ or the Stewardship Ontario or the Recycle BC as the compliance, as the compliance agent, the people that you had to report to and respond to. So that subtle difference really does change things for companies on how they view this. But it also means that in Ontario, they do have to make some changes. They can't just let this thing roll out. They actually will have to make some physical decisions. And that's obviously change inevitably causes some consternation for producers. It's not an easy time in the supply chain world, and this is just another thing that they have to deal with. So hopefully that gives everybody sort of the understanding of what's going on.
Another change that I understand is happening also is the cost associated with the responsibility is changing. At least in Ontario it is. So I guess, Peter, maybe you, if you can help on this, is that it used to be the municipalities had a portion of it, and the producers had one. It sounds like that's migrating right now. That's changing.
Yeah. So we talked about earlier that the sort of concept of producer responsibility is financial and potentially or operational responsibility. And so we've had a number of provinces which are partial responsibility, financial responsibility. So Ontario was basically a 50-50 split between producers and municipalities. And you've got similar types of constructs in Manitoba and Saskatchewan as well. And we're moving now towards producers being fully financially responsible, and also with that, operationally responsible. So they can then make their decisions about how to best set up the collection and processing. And so they're not necessarily just paying invoices from municipalities.
And that varies from province to province. Not two programs are alike. This is not federally managed, and it looks like not everyone is in sync right now in terms of how the provinces work. And some provinces have a program, some expect to have a program, and some don't even have a program. Is that accurate? I guess, Pierre, like I know in Quebec, they were just introducing some new legislation, I think, for Quebec, but it's like the rest of the country. How is the landscape across the country in terms of the different provinces and territories?
So Quebec has an EPR scheme in place since 2005, I think, and it was clearly the model that Peter has mentioned, financially responsible. So the producers were financially responsible for reimbursing the municipalities. And it goes from, I don't know, like I think it was in the past like 50% of the share, but it goes all the way to, in 2013, 100% of all the financial costs were assumed by the producers. And the recent change in the legislation is also to give the producer the operational responsibility of reaching certain targets of end-of-life management. So it's the tendency that Peter has exposed quite well. So it's changing in Quebec as well. It is changing in Ontario, it is changing in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and it's also starting to change and be implemented in the Maritimes, starting with New Brunswick. So there is no one model, and every province is moving at a different time. But if we look at on a 10 years perspective, pretty much all the provinces in Canada will be under, should be under, maybe if we look at the current change in the legislation, under an EPR scheme which is fully operational for the producers. That is one of the biggest change we see across the country.
So thank you. And Gord, one concept or one question that I guess most people don't necessarily understand right away is producer. That word is pretty broad. I know I work for a paper company, and everybody says, "Oh, it's your producer," but so how do we define producers for? And then that's probably going to get into the brand owners and the printers and the marketers that are involved into the direct mail. I think some people will realize that they may have that they may be producers.
That's right. Every province will have a slightly different terminology. And again, prior to Ontario adopting producer, they followed BC, I think, who used producer. The word steward has been used in Ontario and other provinces before. But effectively, let's talk about the obligated party. And Peter touched on this a bit earlier. It tends to focus on a very similar model, which is the brand holder or the brand owner of a product. And then there's a residency test. Now, every province has its own different residency test. In Ontario, for the first time, they decided to expand that residency test. It used to just be resident in Ontario. They've now expanded that for the Ontario provincial regulations to be resident in Canada. And that's a fairly substantive change, because now that brings into play a Quebec-based company who may be selling into Ontario. They still now may have an obligation, and same with the BC-based. And so Ontario's the first province to, shall we say, expand from just looking at residency in the province to residence in Canada. And the reason, they feel confident that they have the ability at the authority level. In Ontario, there's a new authority called, well, not a new one, but there is an authority called the Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority, RPRA. And they feel confident that if they are able to enforce the law outside the provincial borders, which has always been a bit of a limitation with any of the provincial laws. So again, the language in Ontario is resident, a brand owner resident in Canada, or if that resident isn't in Canada, the first importer. And that language tends to imply, for many cases, the retailer. So again, a retailer of mass merchandise who's bringing in material from outside Canada tends to be the first importer. So again, for illustration purposes only, a company like a Walmart or Loblaws who have their own private label, that's their brand, they're obligated for that. If they happen to bring in some products out from outside the country, they would be obligated for that as well. And Ontario, for the first time, is also trying to capture the online market, the online retail market as well. So that tends to be how they follow. Most of the provincial programs have similar basic definitions, but for your industry, it's going to be some slight nuances that we'll probably have to work through, because again, but brand owner first, residency sort of second. Then we have to look at whether there's sort of connections between the two. Tends to be how a regulator or how a producer or how a company may want to look at whether they're impacted of this or not.
Gord, if I can add, I mean, I think one of the most basic ways to think about it is what the government's trying to do in these policies is attach itself to the person that is closest to supplying that product, making the decisions to supply that product to the consumer. So what's the business that's really making the decisions around that product or packaging? And then the second lens Gord talked about residency is really about what does the government have the ability to lawfully enforce? So it's probably going to be difficult for them to enforce a company that's not in Ontario or not in Canada, it's in China. So then after that, there's a kind of, if not this person, the next closest person to who supplied that. And then I'm going to, if not that person, then so there's just a kind of cascading way to try to make sure that the government can capture the closest person to making those decisions lawfully.
So if you're a direct mailer right now or a marketer, and then you end up being the brand owner on this category, so you have to register to these new organizations. So there's a registration process and a registration fee that you have to do. And how do you get measured after that? Is it by quantity, by weight, by like, is it by category of products? How does that work? And I'll probably go back to Peter on this. Like, how does that all work to make sure that there are, obviously it's about the fees. How does that how is that connected to the direct mailer or the marketer?
So let me start backwards, which is probably not the right way to go, but it seems easiest in my brain right now. So the first bit about measurement is typically the materials that you're supplying to the market are measured by weight and the type of material. So, you know, if you look at programs across the country for printed packaging and paper products, there are up to, you know, over 70 categories of different types of materials that your product might fit under. And that's because some materials are easier to recycle than others and less costly, and they've got higher end markets. So it's way cheaper to sort and process newsprint than it is to process coffee cups. So there's different pricing associated with each of those materials. Now, to register, again, it depends a little bit on each province, but typically you're either registering with an oversight agency. In the case of Ontario, that is the Resource Productivity and Recovery Authority, and you're also needing to report into a producer responsibility organization. So that would be like here in Ontario, we've got RISE and Circular Materials and the Resource Recovery Alliance, and then in other provinces like Quebec, you've got EEQ or Recycle BC.
Okay, thank you. And then, and there could be within materials, there's going to be tiered pricing on how this gets charged. So that's probably whereas even if you're not the marketer or the direct mailer, if you're a printer, like we have a lot of group people in our group, if you have a possibility or a chance to influence what substrates or what products are being used, if I understand this right. So Pierre, I'll probably go with you, but is that something that you can make choices on what products you want to use so you get levied less fees, or is that something that we don't really have control over?
So I guess your question is, are material fees different from one another depending on
and they are, and as if I'm a printer and I have a client that comes to me and says I want to do a campaign, a marketing campaign, a direct mail campaign, as a printer, you're able to influence that decision on what substrates will be used and what quantities or what size. That's all going to have an impact on the fee structure.
Exactly, because as Peter mentioned, you know, it depends. The fee structure is based on how much the material costs to be collected, to be sorted, and to be recycled. So a newsprint, the collection will be more or less the same, and you know, for each of the material, but the sorting part would be different. A newsprint will need to have less types of equipment in a sorting center or a MRF, material recovery facility, than a plastic packaging. I know that in your industry, there is a tendency to use more and more what we call flexible plastic packaging for direct mail. This is quite different in terms of fees between boxes, a cardboard. A cardboard will cost less to collect and to recycle, and will have end market mainly in North America and mainly in Canada for that matter, as compared to flexible plastic packaging that are sometimes made of several layers of different types of plastic that are harder to recycle and harder to sort in a sorting center. So with that in hand, the cost will be different, and every pro will manage to set the cost differently according to the regulation, according to, you know, their own vision of what they want to achieve. But at the end, a material that is more costly to process will have higher fees. So definitely the printer will have an impact and can have an influence on the brands and on the customers.
Okay, thank you. Gord, the Canadian government recently announced they were banning some single-use plastic. Is that in the direct mail world? Is that going to have? Is that an impact on the direct mail right now, or is this something? Is that included in direct mail?
That's a good question, and Peter might be able to speak better. I don't believe so. I think most of the bans that I think have been announced are related to individual plastic items, such as food service straws and forks and items like that. I would think that what you might have to look at is whether plastic wraps that may be used to protect groups or packages of direct mail are covered under that federal ban. And again, that federal ban that was just announced. It was announced when I was out of the country, so I haven't had a chance to look at it. But I do know that this has been talked about for a while. But remember, that is still separate than what the provincial requirements that you were dealing with are. Those are the first times that the federal government has actually brought in sort of bans related to waste management, and those will obviously have to be adjusted for and reflected for in each of the provincial programs. But I don't think it would affect them. I don't think it affects the industry dramatically, with the exception of whether you've got some plastic wrapping over some of the products that you're in the marketplace with.
Peter, you want to add something on this?
It won't include that. It doesn't include the plastic wrap. Unless you're including free straws with your coupons or something like that, you might be caught. But very, very unlikely that there would be any impact on those federal efforts.
But the provincial regulation might have a greater impact on those types of packaging, flexible plastic packaging in your industry, because for the first time in the country, at least 2 provinces so far have recycling targets to be reached. So in Ontario, in 2026, 25% of all flexible plastic packaging would have to be recycled or properly managed at the end of life. And this same target would be 40% in Quebec by 2027. And up to today, this is one of the greatest challenge at the sorting facilities to deal with the flexible plastic packaging. So that might introduce a greater impact on your industry.
Okay, whoa. And is there any organizations or industries that are exempt from EPR right now, especially in the direct mail world? Is there anybody that is exempt from it? And Peter seems to he's nodding here, so I'll go to you. But is anyone exempt from it right now?
Yeah, I mean, there are some provinces that have exempted charities. They do not include those, and I'm assuming there's a lot of direct mailings that are coming from like Cancer Care Canada or those types of organizations. Even a number of post-secondary institutions would be charitable organizations. Some have included governmental organizations as well, like municipal governments are not included in those in the responsibilities. And we have seen, I think, for the first time, some exemptions provided to the newspaper publishers as well.
You're saying the municipal authorities are not included. So my recycling calendar I received from the city every year, is that going to be included? Is there some responsibility for the city for the cost of this?
So depending on what province, it's a little bit differently, but in Ontario here, technically municipalities are captured. And so all of those types of things, the recycling calendar, the water bills, the recreational calendars, all that kind of stuff that would be going out to residences would be captured. So we do see, in Ontario right now, there's lots of different organizations like conservation authorities, police departments, hospitals that currently pay in or are registered producers in the province.
Okay. We thought we'd do a couple of scenarios to check on like how does it work. So assuming there's a national chain restaurant, a fast food restaurant that prints, and mails discount coupons to households across the country, and they send some to Ontario, Quebec, the Maritimes, Newfoundland, and Labrador. And so these coupons are all being sent out, and they're printed in Ontario. So how is to be the obligated party would be involved in this case? Is this something that they pay all in Ontario, or they have to declare into every jurisdiction? And I see Gordon smiling, so I'll go to you here, and then you got the Ontario portion probably all figured out. But I want to figure out, how does it work across the country?
Well, again, that's your example is a very interesting one, because I think we may see some different answers here. But again, under the principle of what the advertisement is for, the fast food restaurant, in my opinion, that would be their obligation, because they're the one that is causing the activity or the release of the paper to happen in the marketplace. Whether they are actually reporting on that is a different question, because that may be done, in a sort of by the marketing department, and I still think there may be some challenges as to whether all of those pieces have been put together under that quick service restaurants obligation report. But that's a good example where, again, I don't think you're the member who's producing this, who's printing this and distributing it, should have an obligation if that if that brand owner is, or that restaurant is in Canada and is in all the operations, because of their physical locations in another province. Let's say that the store, even if it's a franchise store, the store gives them residency in that province. So I still think in this particular case that you've given as an example, that should be the obligation of the restaurant chain, as opposed to the printer or the printer and distributor who may have released that. Pete and Pierre, do you concur?
Yeah, I think that would be the answer right across the province, or right across the country, because that's the restaurant's the one closest to making the decision for supply, as Gord said, and I hope they're not advertising in provinces where they don't actually have bricks and mortar. That would be odd, but maybe Uber's driving further these days. So
that's it. With Uber, you never know.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
And then if we take another example where a smaller business, I know I've seen the less than $2 million in gross seems to be a threshold. So we have a small dry cleaner in the Toronto market that does a mailing for in his neighborhood. If their sales are less than $2 million, is that, I've seen this number, is that a number that is actually applied or that works if for size of businesses that can be I guess obligated?
Yeah, in Ontario, the $2 million has been in Ontario right from the beginning of the Stewardship Ontario as sort of what they call the de minimis, the small business exemption level. Below that, the producer doesn't even have to register. They don't. They are, if they're below that, they actually don't have to do anything. If they're above that, then they may have to register with the authority, and then there's still another threshold about how much they supply into the market. But that dry cleaner example, I think in this particular case, would probably fall below that exemption level of 2 million. I would suspect.
And Pierre, is it similar in the province of Quebec? Is there a minimum as well?
It is. Sometimes it's based on revenue. Sometimes it's based on the weight of waste packaging you might be putting on the market. In Quebec, up until now, and I don't know, I could double check sending that to your members. But there is also up to now a flat fee rate in order to reduce the administrative burdens of some, say, middle-sized companies. To register every product they are marketing in every categories. They have a flat fee rates so that they can contribute to the global pot of the collective collection and recycling system without having the administrative burdens of finding the exact category for every SKU they are putting on the markets.
Peter, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, this is one you need to keep a close eye of across the country. So, British Columbia, the threshold is 1 million. I think Alberta's proposing 1.5 million gross revenue. Everybody likes to do this one a little bit differently, and that's gross revenue within that particular province. So there is some differences on that side as to how each jurisdiction has decided to go after it.
And because it's all managed provincially, there is no one website that is the portal for all the EPR in Canada. Am I right? It's just like you got to do your research one province at a time. If you actually have businesses in all these provinces, you have to just follow every province.
So Andrew's put up a guideline that was put out by the Canadian Stewardship Services Alliance, which provides a pretty good outline of what's happening across the country. It doesn't include Ontario's new requirements, if I'm not mistaken. And then EEQ has also got their own guidance material, which is included in the chat box as well. So there are some materials out there, and there are some associations that have taken a bit of a proactive approach to try to put some of that information out. I know folks like the Retail Council have pages that have set up on this side to help their members, because it's a maze of different requirements in each province, and it's not easy to make your way through the various differences between each of the provinces.
And I guess Gord, what's in terms of obviously Ontario being the big one, what's the next big date we need to make sure we are, I guess, paying attention to in Ontario? Because right now it's still, I guess, evolving is probably the best way to call it.
Yeah. There is some of the deadlines with the authority, and so remember, before you deal with any pro to talk about, you still have to kind of deal with the authority. They're the entity in Ontario that you have to register with. They did have a registration and reporting deadline of last October. Now, there's no penalties at this point in time for not registering with them, but you'll have to register with them before you deal with a pro. So keep that in mind. And again, maybe through Andrew or through follow-up, we can make sure you get the web links to the RPRA. They have another reporting deadline for that will be end of October of this coming year. So a few months from now will be the deadline to report to them 2021 data. Now, in all the other provinces, everybody's reported their 2021 data. RPRA is delayed that a little bit in Ontario till October. That's the deadline. They'll have an online system ready to go probably over the summer, with the deadline being October 31st. Those are kind of some immediate deadlines that you have to have in place. There's no immediate deadline for selecting a pro, so your members will have some time to understand this a little bit more, see whether they have an obligation, get to know the pros. The deadline for them technically is July of next year. Obviously, people will want to probably do that over the coming months, and I would recommend that most of if anybody has an obligation in Ontario, that they probably should start reaching out to the pros to understand the obligations over the summer and fall. None of the pros in Ontario have fee rates for next year. That's one of the other key differences that you'll see between the programs. Pierre and Peter have referred to the other provinces actually have posted fee rates. Most times they'll have posted fee rates about 3 to 6 months in advance of the year. Ontario at this moment, we don't have fee rates for 2023.
So we're going blind. We're going blind a little bit into this.
We're going blind, but for a little, right now nobody knows. It's blind right now for the other provinces for 2023, but they typically have set time frames. Typically in the fall, they'll post their fees for 2023. Ontario will get there eventually. We're just not there at the moment. So none of the pros at the moment have fee rates that people can look and compare against for 2023.
And all the pros will have the same fee rates.
Not necessarily. This is where, in theory, some competition should avail itself to having slightly different fee rates. I can say, because we are a pro in Ontario for some of the other regulated products, that there is some differences and competitive differences on fee rates. In theory, that's one of the reasons why you would have some competition at the pro level. But I can say that at the initial stages, especially for the Blue Box program, we have to share the same collection system. Collection is the largest portion of the cost, and then we each get to handle our material, our representative material, slightly different. So we do anticipate fee rates there may be some slight differences, but you know, if they're dramatically different, you know, obviously anybody that's dramatically higher, you know, we'll probably have some challenges having customers, shall we say, over time. No different than the marketplace. So they'll probably get similar in line, but that's where you might want to choose a pro that is giving you better service, you know, giving you some direct support. There may be some other reasons that you might select a pro one over another other than price.
And Pierre, thank you, Gordon. And Pierre, in Quebec, because you're closer to the Quebec portion, obviously, there is no pro system. There's only one. That's the proposed.
Yeah, but the producer have to choose which one it will be. So the regulation has just passed. Quebec is kind of 1 year behind Ontario in terms of changes in the legislation. So the regulation has just passed, and now it's time for producer to choose the pro, right? So for the moment, I'm aware that EQ has, Eco-Entreprise Québec has raised his hand to become that pro, and there is a form on their website if producer want to register. So that's for the Quebec part, but your members should keep an eye also on the other provinces, especially provinces where there is no, up to now, EPR program, even financially, like New Brunswick and Alberta. In the coming month or year, maybe Peter can bring some more knowledge than I have on that. But there will be also some. I know there is some consultation underway on that from some pros. So that would be another key interest of your members.
So we definitely have to make sure we kind of identify every province where there's something and put dates on when action items will be required for every one of them. Peter, I guess you got a bit of visibility on the whole country as well. So every one of them, we have to make sure we're ready for their implementation. Otherwise, there's some penalties for not reporting.
Yeah, I mean, Alberta's moving forward. I think, as Pierre mentioned already, the Yukon has started consultations on their policy. Northwest Territories is just in discussions. New Brunswick is moving forward. Nova Scotia is starting consultations or in the midst of consultations. So there really is stuff happening right across the country. And I think there's a couple of things that your members should think about. One is we're sort of moving to a version 2 of producer responsibility. And that means I think the regulations are trying to encompass more producers and more materials. So they're trying to capture more things. And so areas that maybe there wasn't a lot of attention before, there's going to be more attention. So Ontario, as I mentioned, you're going to see a lot more attention on organizations that might be sending these types of materials, direct mails that maybe weren't caught or weren't paid attention to in the past, real estate agents, law firms that might be over those thresholds, universities. 2, I think that there does appear to be more of a coordinated effort between the provinces to work together and with the federal government working with them. A lot of that focus is more on plastics, but I think it'll lead to the identification of more producers that may not have been aware of what their responsibilities are. And so I think there'll be more attention to sort of catch those outliers. And when you move to 100% financial responsibility, everyone's paying a little bit more attention to what their colleagues are doing, and so they'll want to make sure that more people are caught too. So although it's probably not front and center for the direct mail sector, it's going to be, and there'll be increasing attention. So it's something to really keep a close eye on, I think, moving forward.
So if you were working with direct mail, I guess the direct mail channel, whether it's the marketers or the designers, the printers, there's no real playbook on in that whole category. But what would we advise? I guess one by one, what would you advise the what I call the influencer, the printer, and that are working into this, and the marketers to be aware of, and how to do they need to change anything in what they're doing right now? And I'll start with, I guess, Gordon, I'll go with you.
Yeah, I don't, I would say, generally speaking, I don't think there is, you know, your industry produces or has influence on the products that go out that find their way into blue boxes commonly, right? It's part of the paper stream 9 times out of 10, and largely goes into the blue box. One area that has, as Pete says, as the costs go up, there is a thing called disruptors a little bit, which is a language coming from Europe about you want to discourage things that might impact the recyclability, and some of that we have seen is putting plastic around a bunch of paper, and that I know that may be a form of for your members of getting the material out in a keep it clean, keep it dry, be able to distribute it, but putting a plastic around a paper might cause some people to recycle it exactly the same way, right? They may not open it, and they may not, shall we say, disassemble the plastic from the paper. And so sometimes a disruptor fee is something just to keep an eye on. And for just general recyclability, keeping plastics and paper separate is critical. Recycled content paper is always, I think you probably talked about that within your industry, always important, so that there's a demand for this material. But just keep an eye on things that your members may be doing that that cause the recyclability or the collection of this material to be impacted. And then the other key one that I think we've just discussed a little bit is try to understand as best you can where your members fit in this equation. Sometimes they may have a direct potential role as a producer, depending on their business. But in many cases, I think if they're just printing on behalf of other people, they may not have that responsibility. So I think this information session about understanding where they fit in that complex web is useful. And then obviously just making sure that they're not complicating the recyclability of the material, I think at the end of the day is also important.
Thank you. Pierre, anything you would want to give as a word of advice for the marketers and the influencer in that world?
I think I will go with Gordon on this recyclability thing. This is maybe one of the key topics that would be introduced by the new legislation in place, either directly by the legislation like in Quebec, or indirectly by the desire from producer to making sure that they can reach the different recycling targets they are responsible to reach. And recyclability assessment will become something that is going to be more and more important in the coming years. So as Gordon said, don't mix material. Paper is a paper, plastic is a plastic. But even on the plastic, don't mix. If you can, go to a recycle-ready type of packaging. That's particularly the case for flexible plastic packaging, as I have mentioned, where you can find a lot of different layers. And that's my son is working with me.
Perfect.
With me too. And so yeah, I think it's gonna be very important to keep that in mind. And on the last comment of Gordon regarding the different responsibilities, there is also something that is coming to be quite different from at least Quebec, and maybe it's going to be introduced in some other jurisdiction in the coming years, is the fact that for the moment, the program are based on the product your members are selling to the consumers, meaning the people at the households. In Quebec is going to be introduced the B2B transaction as well in the obligation, and that's something that could even become more present in the other provinces. So, keep an eye on all the jurisdiction have all the exceptions, because it could impact how you have to register.
Well, thank you. And Peter, any word of advice you would have for the industry?
I think Pierre and Gord have caught it really well. The only thing I'd mention is just, I think understanding the responsibility between your members and their clients, I think is important. Neither one wants to get caught off guard with a bill they didn't expect or potential action. So making sure that there is some understanding between those two, I think is important moving forward. So that again, everyone keeps their nose clean moving forward. I don't see this industry as a high priority for oversight organizations, given the fact that the materials have a lot of value generally associated with them. It's not they're not the large generators per se, but I think over time it's something to really to pay attention to.
Because paper is a higher I guess recovery rate than I guess flexible plastics.
Absolutely, yeah.
It does, but it also has in Ontario. It also has the highest targets as well. And
Yeah.
for the first time in Canada, there's enforceable targets in Ontario starting in 2026. And so, yes, so just keep that in mind as well.
So we have some education work to do collectively to make sure that we get to those levels.
Mm-hmm.
I guess at this point I'll check with Andrew if you've seen some questions coming on the chat or anywhere else, because I can't keep up on all the activity.
There's one question that comes to mind and that's put to everybody. In the past, there used to be a possibility to provide a singular spot to input data through an organization called the Canadian Stewardship Services Alliance. Does that still exist? And is there an opportunity for that, or is there still a possibility for that, or is there some work that's being done to amalgamate the reporting structure to enable people to simplify how they push data out?
So why don't I try to start on that one, if that works. It's a loaded question in a number of ways, but so there really hasn't been, because of Quebec and because the way Quebec operates, it runs a little differently than everybody else. There's never been a singular. CSSA represented the rest of Canadian programs. But there's never been a singular. I think there's work underway and being pushed certainly through the federal government to try to harmonize more. So to make sure that the reporting requirements are very similar right across the province and there's clear understanding. Whether that will ever happen, I'm not sure. Every province sees itself as a bit of a snowflake. So we don't like to necessarily follow suit with each other. But there is work. The producers are certainly looking at ways that they can try to harmonize more, even within the organizations. I know RISE is doing work and trying to make sure where they operate that there is consistency in their reporting types of structures, and some of the other organizations are looking to do the same as well. Gord, I'll let you take over from there.
Yeah. Again, you've hit the nail on the head. The CSSA was sort of the one body when they represented 4 provinces. Now they're down to 2. They've gone the other way, and that's just because of some of both Ontario changing the requirements and some business situations that happen in the marketplace. So Andrew, we're a little bit further away today now than we were in the past about harmonizing on the reporting, and that's always been a frustration of producers. That's just the nature of the federal nature we have in this country about the provinces each having some slightly different requirements. Even on something like beverage containers, where you have literally the same producers, the same programs in similar provinces, they haven't achieved that. So This is just one of those nice to haves. We haven't been able to get there. Everybody thinks that we should logically get there, and I don't disagree with you. We just haven't seen a lot of evidence of it. Even in Europe, where Europe has, European Union with regulations, they still have different things by countries and different definitions. So it's the harmonization is the thing that we've been striving for years. We haven't been able to achieve it, and I don't sort of see it on the short-term horizon anyways.
Well, thank you. And I have to wrap it up here as we're coming to the end of the hour, but I definitely want to thank the panelists for their participation today. This is, I have a feeling we'll have other conversations in the next few months about this. For everyone on the call, there will be a brief questionnaire for you to complete just before you hang up on this event. So we ask you to please go through the questionnaire. It helps us tailor our events to the need of our membership. The session was recorded, and as Ward mentioned earlier, you can have it. It'll be posted on YouTube channel, and then you can if you registered this, you'll receive it, and hopefully you'll enjoy the video. You'll be able to share it with your colleagues and your network, and then you can subscribe to our channel by clicking the little bell icon, and then you'll be notified whenever there's new material. Finally, I want to make sure, if you can, please join SMG, the Sustainable Mail Group. As more people we have into this, the more we have a better community that can share this information, and we can continue to build the content for the group. I would say stay tuned, as we'll have more invitations coming up. Wish you definitely a good summer for all of you. Again, thanks to the panelists. Thank you, Ward, for kicking this off. Thanks to all our participants who were here as well. This is very interesting, informative. Hopefully you found it the same way. And then stay tuned, more to come for sure. But thank you, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day.